one of the dumbest decisions in sports of the past 30 years. Yeah, I feel good about that. One of the dumbest decisions in sports of the past 30 years has now become one of the most comical issues in sports, at least of the last 5 to 10. So let me give you some history and some context, and then how it goes from dumb to ridiculously silly in just a matter of days. So let's go back in time. Don't get bogged down by the history of all this, but I think you have to know the history to appreciate the context, to appreciate the stupidity of this issue that just keeps dragging on and on and on, and now has reached the point of being comical. Okay, so here we go. Go back in time. It's reported by ESPN that Reggie Bush and USC. He doesn't even play in the NFL anymore. I think he's on TV now. Reggie Bush and USC each returned their copies of the 2005 Heisman Trophy after a 4-year NCAA investigation determined that at that time, during his career at USC, Bush and his family accepted cash, travel expenses, and a house. At the time. I know it's all a blur now. But hang on, this really gets important and silly. So he and his family were given a house in San Diego. They lived rent-free for more than a year, and they were given $10,000 to furnish the home. This was coming from agents at the time wanting to sign Reggie Bush to a contract. Used to happen a lot when I was playing, and this was where the money was coming from, and agents would try to get you to post date some sort of contractual signature and front you a bunch of stuff. In his case, they got him his parents a house and cash and a car. It was very illegal at the time. It was very, very much against the rules. Everybody knew it. It went on for a long, long time. This happened in other places, not just USC, but it was very much against the rules, and everybody knew it. The NCAA delivered sanctions, I guess it was 5 or 6 years later. And they mandated that he disassociate himself from USC. And that included, I believe, a 2-year postseason ban for USC. And they lost 14 games, were wiped out. 14 win. Now, this is an important time, of course, because they were chasing a three-peat in college football until Texas came along and beat them in the very end. But they were forced to vacate 14 wins. And that included a 2-year postseason ban. They lost 30 scholarships. And then his disassociation, his ban from USC, went for 10 years. That ended, by the way, back in June of 2 or 3 years ago, I believe. Okay, so on the day, July 21st, according to ESPN, the day name, image, and likeness rights were granted to athletes by the NCAA. Now, this allows them to just get cash from anybody they want, practically. It's a slush fund. It made what used to be against the rules is now very well within the rules. Anybody can give you practically anything they want. No, they can give you anything they want. So when that happened, he got bent out of shape. You could say for good reason, because the rules that he lived under, the rules that punished him to the point of losing his Heisman Trophy, were no longer against the rules. Got it? He issued a statement saying, "It is my strong belief that I won the Heisman Trophy solely, in quotations, due to my hard work and dedication on the field. It is also my firm belief that my record should be reinstated." Okay, now you can have an opinion about that. There's a lot of silliness coming up, but you can have an opinion about that if the rules changed and it was no longer against the rules to take money, then the stuff that happened before should be wiped out altogether. That was his position. Now, he took it further, and it was the beginning of the silliness, but you can argue that. I tend to disagree. I think you knew the rules at the time, whether you liked them or whether they're different now. Everybody knew the rules at the time. So he said, I want my Heisman Trophy back. I want all the wins reinstated. We want everything back. In particular, he wanted his Heisman Trophy back. And I'm fine if you want to argue that. I don't think you should get it back, but okay. So the NCAA stepped in and said, no, that's not at all, man, because, yeah, you can now get cash, you can now get benefits, you can now get all the stuff that was illegal in 2005 and long before that. But no, why would we reinstate everything when you broke the rules at that time? So the NCAA came back in and said, no, in the name of fairness, no, you're not getting the Heisman Trophy back, and no, they're not going to reinstate the losses, and whatever you want to do with USC is your business. But the NCAA came back and said, no, that's not the case. Then it gets dumber. It just keeps, it's like a cascading of stupidity all the way down in this issue, which is going on today. So then he decides, when the NCAA comes out less than a year ago and says, no, we thought about it, but no, you're not getting the Heisman Trophy back, and you're not getting the wins back, you're not getting the records back. Sorry. He sued the NCAA. Are you ready for it? Defamation. You know how many times a week I hear defamation? And almost every single time, it's just because your feelings were hurt. So he sued the NCAA. I don't know exactly who he sued, but I guess the entire bureaucracy by itself. He sued the NCAA for defamation, for claiming that he, in essence, was a cheater. Except, wait, he was a cheater. Like, it's not defamation if it's true. You do know that, right? At the time, it was true. At the time, he broke the rules. Just less than a year ago, when the NCAA came back and said, NCAA, so is the governing body of college sports, although college sports doesn't really have any rules anymore. And the NCAA is like your neighborhood association. It's pretty goofy and bureaucratic, but it did exist, and it did hand down punishment. And when it did, he had broken the rules. And they came out less than a year ago and said, no, man, you don't get all this stuff back. You broke the rules. And he said, you can't say I broke the rules. I'll sue you. And they've said, what? Huh? We'll meet you somewhere. What are you talking about? So he then sues to get all the stuff back. He sues over defamation. I suspect he'll go 0 for 2 in those fights. Okay, now let's just tackle that part first and then the silliness. So, did Reggie Bush deserve the Heisman Trophy that year that he won, 2005? It was an epic season. Of course, ended up with an epic, one of the greatest college championship games of all time. Did he deserve it that year? The answer is sure, maybe. I think Vince Young was more deserving. Reggie Bush was sensational that year, but so was Vince Young. And I would argue, if we're just going to go back in time just to argue who deserved the Heisman Trophy that year, you can call me a homer, but I think that Vince Young deserved the Heisman Trophy because he carried a team on his back. Reggie Bush that season, for as much of a dynamic player that he was, and he was. I mean, those are two of the most sensational, dynamic players at one time in the college game that you'll ever see. But Reggie Bush had offensive stars all around him. Vince Young did not. That's just an argument that I think, since they finished 1 and 2, Reggie Bush won the Heisman Trophy, Vince Young finished second. I would argue then, and would still argue to this day, that Vince Young was probably more deserving. But it's not like Reggie Bush wasn't a great player. Got it? Second, Reggie Bush's award was vacated, and it should go to Vince Young. As soon as the ruling was handed down, the idea that the trophy goes to blank is silly to me. It should have gone to the person who finished a very close second in the Heisman race. Now, it's awkward and it's kind of a buzzkill. But I think the day that the award was pulled from one guy for, quote, cheating, why wouldn't it go to the second person? It never did. As it stands, the winner of the 2005 Heisman Trophy is blank. I think that's ridiculous. I think the award, whether his name was Vince Young or not, should have gone to the runner-up. Period. I mean, I think that's fair. Awkward, yes, years later, but fair. Now the silly part. Okay, there's that debate whether he should get the award back because the rules have changed and everybody gets cash now. And so, it's no more, it wouldn't be against the rules anymore, but it was then. Should he get the award back? Then what to do with the trophy if he's never going to get it back? Why wouldn't it not go to Vince Young? And now to pour gas on the stupidity. The silliest part of all, I think. Here comes Johnny Manziel. Jeff, why? Well, I'm glad you asked. Johnny Manziel. Johnny Manziel, as of the last 48 hours, has decided to act like he's Nelson Mandela going on a hunger strike over the horrible wrongdoing of the Heisman Trophy. Boy. Okay. Fundamental question. If something was against the rules previously, but the rules have changed present day, does that make the breaking of the rules previously non-existent? It's just like a fundamental question. I don't think so. If you get a traffic ticket 10 years ago, but it's no longer a traffic violation, do you get it back? Johnny Manziel acting like Nelson Mandela. So here he goes. ESPN is now reporting today that Johnny Manziel is taking on this cause, and he is not happy, and he's just going to lay down the law. He says, quote, today, after careful thought and consideration, I will humbly be removing myself from the Heisman Trophy ceremony until Reggie Bush gets his trophy back. Yeah. There, take that, everyone. He goes on to say, doesn't sit right with my Johnny Manziel, okay? He's lecturing the world now on ethics and morals. Doesn't sit right with my morals and values that he can't be on that stage with us every year. Reggie is, in all caps, the Heisman Trophy. What does that mean? I know he's not Jonathan. Nelson Mandela. He is not, just so you know, he is not the Heisman Trophy. I don't think it's the Reggie Bush Trophy. He goes on to say he is the Heisman Trophy. Do the right thing, NCAA. The ball is in your court. End quote. Jonathan Manziel, the great human rights activist of our time. Okay, well, that's just stupid. No, that's silly. The first part of this whole story is stupid. That part is just ridiculously silly. How can the sport, I ask everyone, how can the sport go on if Johnny Manziel is boycotting? How can we all go on? You don't even feel like getting out of bed tomorrow now that Johnny Manziel is boycotting the sport. He's not going to attend the Heisman Award ceremony from now on. And I suspect he is now trying this crusade to get other Heisman Trophy winners to get on board to not be a part of the Heisman Trophy anymore so that Reggie Bush can get his Heisman Trophy back, even though he clearly broke the rules at the time. Right? He's going to try to, Johnny Manziel on his own, is going to try to right the wrong of the Heisman Trophy committee. He's going to try to right all these terrible wrongs because, as he says, the morality of this doesn't sit well with him. You know, he's on that hunger strike. You know who should be complaining after all these years? Who should have been complaining almost from the very beginning? Vince Young. You can argue it wasn't his Heisman Trophy for a while, but once it was vacated, it was his. He had earned it. By the way, one final question as Johnny Manziel goes on this anti-Heisman Trophy crusade, of which many of you now are going to say, that's it, Jeff, I'm boycotting. I'll boycott the entire sport. If Johnny Manziel can go on a hunger strike because of this wrong, then I'm going to boycott the sport as well. How many of you even knew that Johnny Manziel was at the Heisman Trophy ceremony last year? He acts, the great Johnny Manziel, the moral crusader of the sport, he acts like his face is on the trophy.